They say you never truly know the person sleeping next to you. For 15 years, I thought I was the exception to that rule. My name is Elias, and I lived what most people in the quiet suburbs of Oak Creek, Illinois, called a charmed life. My wife, Elena, was the anchor of our home, a woman of grace, intelligence, and a laugh that could light up the darkest room. We had two beautiful children, a house with a wraparound porch, and a future that looked like a clear blue horizon. But horizons are deceptive. They hide the storms brewing just out of sight. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome to Family Secrets and Revenge. It started with the phone. Not a dramatic discovery, just a shift in the atmosphere. Elena began taking calls in the garden, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper whenever I walked into the room. She blamed it on stress at her architectural firm, claiming a new partner, Julian, was pushing for impossible deadlines. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Trust was the foundation of our marriage, or so I thought. I worked long hours as a civil engineer to provide for us, never realizing that while I was building bridges for the city, the bridge to my wife's heart was being dismantled piece by piece. The truth didn't come out in a confrontation, it leaked out through a forgotten iPad. Our youngest, Leo, brought it to me because Mommy's messages are popping up and blocking the game. I looked down expecting a work notification. Instead, I saw a string of texts that turned my blood to ice. They weren't just professional, they were visceral, intimate, and devastating. Julian wasn't just a partner at work. He was the man she was planning to build a new life with. When Elena walked through the door that evening, I didn't yell. I couldn't. I felt hollow, like a building that had been gutted by fire while the facade remained standing. I laid the iPad on the kitchen island. The color drained from her face, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she did something worse. She justified it. She told me she was suffocating in our routine, that Julian made her feel seen in ways I hadn't in years. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Within a week, the woman I had loved for nearly 2 decades was packing her bags. She wasn't just leaving me, she was leaving the life we'd built. She told the kids it was a trial separation, but the way she looked at Julian's sleek black sedan waiting at the curb told a different story. She was chasing a fantasy, convinced that the grass was greener on the other side of the fence. She took her half of our savings, a significant sum we'd earmarked for the kids' college funds, and walked away without looking back. Elena and Julian moved into a high-rise condo in downtown Chicago. From what I heard through mutual friends, they were living the high life. Expensive dinners, weekend trips to Napa, designer clothes. Julian was a high-stakes investor, or so he claimed. He promised Elena a life of luxury that my steady, middle-class income could never provide. She was blinded by the glitter, unable to see the shadow he was casting over her future. Back in Oak Creek, I was drowning. My children were heartbroken, confused, and angry. I had to be their rock while I was crumbling inside. Every corner of our house reminded me of her. I threw myself into work and fatherhood, determined that our family story wouldn't end in the wreckage she left behind. I started watching Family Secrets and Revenge for some perspective, realizing that betrayal is a common thread in the human experience. But it doesn't have to be the final chapter. 6 months later, the call started. Not to me, but to her sister, Sarah. Elena's voice was different, no longer arrogant, but strained. Julian's investments weren't doing well. He had convinced Elena to reinvest her divorce settlement into a new venture. She had handed over every cent of her liquid assets, trusting the man who had helped her destroy her family. If you were in Elias' shoes, watching the person who hurt you start to stumble, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. The high-rise condo was the first thing to go. Then the car. It turned out Julian wasn't a genius investor. He was a gambler using other people's money to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Elena was now living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, working extra shifts just to keep up with the debt Julian had racked up in her name. The soulmate who had made her feel seen was now barely looking at her unless he needed more money. One Tuesday morning, Elena woke up to an empty apartment. Julian was gone. So was her remaining jewelry, her laptop, and the last few $1,000s in their joint account. He hadn't left a note. He had simply vanished, leaving her with the lease, the utility bills, and the crushing realization that she had traded a diamond for a piece of shattered glass. Elena reached out to me for the first time in a year. She sounded like a ghost. She asked if she could come over to see the kids. I agreed, but only in a public park. When she showed up, I barely recognized her. The spark was gone. She looked exhausted, broken, and, for the first time, truly repentant. She tried to apologize, but words felt too small for the magnitude of the damage she'd caused. She confessed the full extent of the disaster. Julian had left her nearly $80,000 in debt. Her credit was ruined, her savings were gone, and she was facing eviction. She had sacrificed her family, her reputation, and her financial security for a man who didn't even know her middle name. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. The hardest part wasn't her loss of money. It was the loss of her children's respect. When she tried to explain herself to our eldest daughter, Maya, the response was chilling. Maya didn't yell. She simply said, "You left us for a lie, Mom. Now you have to live with it." The silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Elena tried to sue Julian, but there was nothing to recover. He had used aliases and offshore accounts. The police called it a civil matter, and the lawyers told her she'd spend more trying to find him than she'd ever get back. She was legally tied to his debts, a permanent reminder of her lapse in judgment. Revenge is often thought of as something you do to someone, but I realized that the most powerful revenge is simply letting someone face the consequences of their own choices. I didn't have to lift a finger. Elena's life had become a prison of her own making. While I had rebuilt our home into a sanctuary of peace, she was wandering through the ruins of a fantasy. It has been 2 years now. I've been promoted at work, and the kids are thriving. We laugh again. The house feels like a home, not a crime scene. Elena works 2 jobs and lives in a small studio. We are civil for the sake of the kids, but the intimacy is gone forever. I've learned that a family's strength isn't in its perfection, but in its resilience. Looking back, I realized that Elena didn't just lose her money, she lost her identity. She let a stranger define her worth, and when he left, he took her sense of self with him. I, on the other hand, found mine in the wreckage. I found a strength I never knew I had. Thinking about Elias' journey and Elena's downfall, do you believe that life eventually balances the scales of justice? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Life has a funny way of bringing us back to where we belong, even if the path there is paved with thorns. Thank you for walking through this journey with me today. It's a reminder that while betrayal can destroy a family, truth and time have a way of rebuilding what matters most. If this story touched you, please give us a like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge for more stories of truth, betrayal, and the long road to justice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that there is life after the storm. Until next time, stay strong and keep seeking.